Good evening and welcome back. As the economic toll of the lockdown hits, we see that maybe the cure really is worse than the problem. And there are several studies now to show this. The UN saying that 130 million people will starve because of the economic downturn, with fast food joints like Wendy's in America not serving beef anymore because of food shortages in a developed nation as in the United States, as millions of people filing for unemployment claims in the US and hitting record highs in the UK as well. We have a study from South Africa suggesting that their data analysts say that the lockdown will lead to 29 times more deaths than coronavirus. And of course, everything has a knock-on effect that they would say, well, people get the coronavirus and therefore the deaths are seen. There's a bit of a lag of 2 weeks. Well, yes, and there's also a lag seen with the economy of about, instead of 2-3 weeks, 2-3 months. And that is what we're seeing here. And the thing is, of course, that even when people can go back to work, it's going to take a while to get them back, seeing as the government message, in the UK at least, has been perhaps a bit too effective insofar as saying that it's so important that you stay home and protect the NHS and save lives that now people don't want to go out, even if schools were reopened. 2 in 5 parents say that, as in 40%, that they would not send their children to school. But the message has been a bit too strong, and of course it's almost impossible for the government to then say, yes, we made a mistake, unless they want all their credibility shot in an open, honest manner, which would be nice to then at least be able to say, we were wrong, maybe moving forward we should give guidance instead of not allow you to get an income and then be reliant on the state. And as we've seen the world over so many times, it doesn't work with central planning, which is what they're trying to do here, to say, oh, you're essential, which means you can work, but you can only do this much, and therefore we're going to decide where it needs to go because we're giving other people this amount of money and we're rationing the amount that they can get. This is very similar to what happens in the USSR, and we know that it didn't work there at all, as it never works, but still is trying to be repeated again in the UK of all places. And when you view it through that lens, it gets a bit much, you know. So, the data analyst here says the model, which will be made public today for debate, was developed by a consortium calling itself PANDA, Pandemic Data Analysis, which includes 4 actuaries, an economist, and a doctor, while the work was checked by lawyers and mathematicians. Brilliant. Instead of one institute or particularly one person, like Professor Neil Ferguson. Good change there. The process was led by 2 fellows at the Actuarial Society of SA, Peter Carlson and Nick Hudson. So according to the research, the 29 figure is a conservative estimate of how many lives will be lost due to the impact of poverty caused by economic hardship over the long term. So this isn't a thing of sudden starvation, how many people are going to be dead from it within a couple of years. It's a thing saying, given the population and when people die if they've got coronavirus, how much they would have lived if they hadn't contracted it, compared to how many people are going to be affected by living in poverty and how much their lives are going to be shortened, that they've said because it's predominantly older people who get infected, then the total lives lost, or total years of lives lost, isn't as great. If a 101-year-old gets coronavirus and dies, they've probably lost a couple of months of life, for example. Whereas if you have someone who's 25 and they lose the job and kill themselves, then they've probably lost about 60 years of life. And that's a huge difference. And it's those kind of things that they're taking into account, but more so in terms of the malnutrition that would result in people's lives shortening. And then, of course, the high physical labor and the breakdown of the body that causes because they have to work more in order to try and get by, which decreases their lives as well. That's why we see the life expectancy being shorter in poorer countries. And it's exactly the same thing here. If you make a richer country a poorer country, you would expect their life expectancy to take the downturn to the poorer country as well. So with that in mind, they've got the 29 times figure, saying that they estimate 5.4 years of life have been lost per COVID-19 death on average. So they would have lived 5.5 years longer if they didn't have the coronavirus. So they estimate the difference of years of lives lost, 26,800 to 473,500. Whereas, compared to the effect that poverty has, and they're saying that 3 to 7 million jobs will be lost, that the years lost will be between 14 and 24 million, which makes the 29 times figure applicable. But it's the conservative estimate, so it could be far higher than that. But it's never quite clear when working with estimates anyway. So the model also showed that based on European data, bringing it back home, 90% of COVID-19 deaths were in people 70 or older with one or more comorbidity. I believe it's 98%, while the relative risk to the young and healthy is negligible. Of course, hence fewer years of lives lost. And if you want to take it one step further and say productive years left, then the difference would be phenomenally greater, as we would expect, of course. And I don't just mean this is all for the GDP, but I mean that if you want a functioning society, you have to have at least as much being given as much being taken. If you want a growing society, you want people to be able to specialize, you want people to be able to have free time, you want people to be able to have a better standard of living, then they need to be giving in more than they're taking out. Simple matter. More than that, they say in the UK, Professor Richard Sullivan warns that there will be more excess cancer deaths than total coronavirus deaths due to cancer victims not getting screenings and treatment due to the focus on COVID-19. So maybe it's serious and maybe they've helped fewer people die than would otherwise, but we're seeing that cancer has taken a back seat now in order to deal with the hip new trend, if you will, where everyone's got a shorter attention span from the internet. So in other economical developments, the Heathrow third runway may never be built, according to the Daily Mail, saying the CAO says £14 billion expansion will not be needed for 10 to 15 years and won't happen at all unless economy recovers from COVID, as airport loses £200 million a month. So they've been wanting this since basically the 1970s, since 1979, maybe. Others would say the 80s, the 90s, and some would say as recently as 2002, 2003, with Labour trying to say, we should maybe be expanding this infrastructure about. And it's gone back and forth, and it does seem odd that Labour are for it and Conservatives aren't, but I'm sure there's definitely something more there than just party politics. So the boss, John Holland-Kane, says airport's £14 billion expansion plan is no longer a priority. He suggests a failure to reboot the economy could see it scrapped altogether. Airport has spent years arguing that the third runway is needed to boost economy, but the coronavirus pandemic means future of aviation industry is uncertain. Well, of course. At this point, they would have been able to make their money back from the third runway, but with many of these things that obviously I'm not looking for a government investment to do it. It's basically just saying, hey, if everybody who's working at Heathrow thinks that it's going to be worthwhile and they wish to make that investment because they're going to be getting a return, then by all means, go ahead. It all then comes down to planning permission. Of course, it affects the road next to it, which has to go under the runway, or the runway's going over it, however you view it. I understand that, in which case, of course, you do need to coordinate with people other than the runway. And then there are concerns about noise pollution, but let's be real, if you live near one of the busiest airports in the world, you're not really expecting it to be quiet. And yes, they do have 4 different noise reduction routes that they've had since the 60s, and they follow them in order to try and stop noise, and they change direction after 3 p.m. to give some more noise abatement. But being real about it, if you're in the financial capital of the world, and you've got one of the busiest airports in the world, you're not expecting it to be that quiet near there. On the flip side, you've got such an amazing opportunity for more flights to more places at lower rates, because they can fly more people around and therefore lower the price of the tickets. Very straightforward. Fantastic opportunity. But no. So unfortunately, he has of course said, well, maybe it can't happen because we're only using one runway at the moment. There aren't enough air carriers that are using the runways or think that they will be using it. They're going to be going out of business as well. It's going to take too long for people to get back to normal. Even just trying to get through the terminals, that we would need more infrastructure for that, given that the delay is now going to be about 4 hours instead of 2 hours to try and get onto a flight because of all the screening that needs to take place, and then all the cleaning between flights, and the screening and the cleaning of the people, and the tests that need to be done with the heat, and then maybe blood or saliva tests as well. And then you might have to be cleansed as well if you're wanting to get on the flight. So that there's so much that goes into it that it would take so long to do, and therefore make it even more difficult to get enough flights out in order to warrant 2 runways, let alone 3. And of course, given the economic downturn, that there won't be enough people being able to afford going abroad, in which case there'll be even fewer aircraft flying. So not just people not wanting to, but people not being able to. And that is what we're seeing here. So of course they're taking a huge hit. So unless they can repurpose it to try and get more cargo flown in, for example, and they repurpose it that way, they're going to have to find some way to get it to work. Otherwise, they're in an incredibly sticky situation, let's say, and their best hope would then be to sell it off to probably a pool of investors or a very, very wealthy investor who is in it for the long run, understanding that it's most likely going to lose money over the next few years, but if they're investing in it for 20 years or so, then they should make their money back after that point. That is their best bet. But we'll have to see if that goes that way. The same for the airlines, of course. If they wish to stay afloat, then they'll probably have to sell a load of their shares and float it in order to attract the investment, and maybe even a greater private investment, in order to keep themselves going, if they can't try and find another way in order to make their airline work. If, again, they wish to transfer over to cargo, as I believe it's the 747, where they can just lift the nose at the front, and therefore it's being repurposed for a cargo, which is fantastic. And obviously, Branson was a fan of 747s with Virgin. Therefore, if they can convert some of their old 747s into cargo planes in order to transfer things for the time being, then that is a way that they could stay afloat as well, if there's enough trade going between countries, which there should be. So there are definitely contingency plans. And as is the case with any of this, that you might say, well, people are going to be ordering more, and they may not care if they order it locally or if they order it from abroad, in which case you might have increased cargo, in which case, fantastic, that's going to be a great opportunity for them as well. That with any difficulty like this, there are opportunities and more ways to make money, because making money basically just means you're helping people out, provided you're not a politician. In which case, if you want to be a billionaire, find a way to help a billion people. It's that kind of thing. That if they find a way to adapt in order to find out how they can use their resources to help people in the current predicament, then they're still going to stay afloat. And even in a regular economy, you're never going to succeed if you keep doing the same things over and over again, because you need to be able to adapt and improve as regular things change, people's interests change, technology improves, and you've got competition and other innovators thinking of new ways to do things. That's been the same since time immemorial. So you always need to be able to adapt. And therefore, if these companies are that big and they're reasonably young and big, still owned by the same person who made them, again, like Virgin, then you'd hope someone like Richard Branson would have the brain in order to identify where he can diversify and still gain an income by doing something slightly different with the resources that he has. He's no stranger to flying off the beaten path for like hostage rescuing and the like. And then finally, a very, very different story. Very briefly, just Michelle Obama's new show has come out. Woo! Back into politics. And saying that having children was a concession she had to make that forced her to give up her aspirations and dreams after becoming Barack's equal. And that's her decision. Really don't recommend saying that, seeing as her children, I think, 18 and 21. If they're that young, then really not a good idea, given that your children are still impressionable. Yes, they're adolescents, young adults, but nonetheless, definitely not something you want to say. Also considering that other people will be responding to them in the same way that you've said, seeing as you are a very public figure as well. And even if you're not a public figure, it's a horrible thing to say for your children. But Michelle Obama is, of course, in the minority, as are any successful people. That they're in the minority if they're financially super successful, like these folks here. And the life advice from her may not be suitable for other people. Trying to say, well, hey, it was more important that I was in a competition with my husband in order to be the better person and get more money, that was more important to me than a family. It was, of course, a very masculine trait that she showed, trying to suggest that financial success is the main way of showing success, instead of being a caring woman, a wife, a mother, showing the enthusiasm and ambition from a feminine perspective, trying to say that, hey, what I really want is a home to be proud of. What I really want is a husband who supports me financially and I support him emotionally, in that his victories are my victory, his losses are my losses. We work as a team, we're together, we go through everything together, and we're stronger for that. We're inseparable, we're always there for each other, we care for each other and want the best for each other. That is what you're looking for female ambition. The same as, I want the best for my children, I want to be able to give them the best home experience that I can, I want to be able to give them the best education opportunities that I can, I want to make sure that they grow up to be good people and that their successes are my successes, their losses are my losses, and we can get through things together. And I can make them the best people that they can be going into the world, and hopefully they'll take care of me in my old age as well. That is what you want from a woman, as in feminine ambition. That is what the vast majority of women are happy with, and the vast majority of men are happy having as a partner. And the children, very difficult. It's not an easy road, and so if you're looking for an easy life, it's a stupid idea. But if you understand that in order to have a sense of fulfillment, you need to take on challenges and overcome difficulties, and a place where you can't just say, yeah, that's a daily habit that is good, but I kind of lost interest and I'm not doing it anymore. You can't do that with children. So even if you like to take on hard things but find that you quit, that is not something that children let you do, and therefore you do actually have to be disciplined and stick with it and see it through, and therefore you feel so much better at the end of it because you actually have accomplished something by working on it for 20 years, let's say for 2 decades, and you've been acutely aware of it every single day for 2 decades. If you do any habit every day for 2 decades, you're going to see astounding results. And it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. And that's the point. But if you go into it with the wrong mentality and you're resentful towards your husband and your children because of that, then of course it's not going to work. And if you go into the article, she actually says that Barack Obama has been incredibly supportive of her, and that he started off as her junior and she was his mentor, but she already felt inferior, and therefore I suppose we're just drawn to a more alpha male who was more intelligent and forthright, but then felt insecure within herself. So understood that she wanted a man who was a proper man, but then insecure in herself and could never get over that. So I sympathise, but I don't think it's right to then take that onto your children as well. I understand Gary Vee's argument to say he wants to be more successful than his children, but that doesn't mean he wants bad things to happen for them and he doesn't regret having children. So, anyway, that's it for now. Let's hope we can get back to life as normal, and maybe these celebrities which are fading into obscurity will fade even more so into obscurity, and we can get back to what's important in life. So, until next time, have a good one.